peace talks that could then lead to a peace agreement between the United States and Iran. However, in the past couple of days, of course, there have been a lot of tensions, especially in the Persian Gulf region, with the United States and Iran trading blows there that made progress towards peace more difficult. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Tehran.
We're now on our top story, the war in Iran. Let's go to CNN national security analyst Alex Plitzis. He is the director of the Counterterrorism Project at the Atlantic Council. Alex, President Trump has been insisting that the U.S. and Iran are close to an agreement, and now we had these strikes today. What's the message being sent with these strikes?
So it seems as though there was the last minute details that needed to get worked out on a couple of the nuclear issues in the nuclear file, which weren't coming to a conclusion. And the president had lost his patience and was politely messaging the Iranians at first, you need to bring this to a conclusion. They weren't listening. He felt they were dragging their feet. And so kinetic strikes were ordered as a means of influencing the Iranians to try to get them to come back to the table and finalize this deal.
Major escalation. The U.S. has launched a new wave of strikes against Iran as talks between the two sides continue to stall. This latest round finishing up just a short time ago. The Pentagon says that the attacks are in response to Tehran's unwarranted and continued aggression. Trump had this warning, warned this could happen, writing on social media that Iran is taking too long to negotiate a deal and that it'll have to pay the price. And his frustrations came to a head today as he bemoaned the slow-going pace of talks.
I've been working with Iran for a number of months, and it was just tap, tap, tap. I don't know what they're doing. We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers. We have a fully negotiated, but they're tapping and tapping. And I said, all right, let's give them a couple of more days. They're tapping because it's a meaningful paper.
It's a sharp change in tone from the president, who for months now has insisted that a deal is right around the corner.
We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. And they want to make a deal so badly. You have no idea how badly they want to make a deal.
Could you foresee a deal in Iran this upcoming week?
I do see a deal in Iran, yeah. Most of the points are already negotiated and agreed to. We're very close to making a deal. We were very close to a deal. I don't think there are any sticking points. We're very close to having a very, very good, strong, powerful deal.
The frustration is starting to show, and Trump is putting more red lines on the table, more ultimatums. And it seems to me that it's not disconnected from the economic news that we got today, which is that inflation has spiked once again, now at 4.2% annually for the month of May. It is having an impact on the economy and even Trump's own timeline. We've blown past that so many times at this point. He's starting to show his frustration.
We've got fast-moving breaking news tonight as the U.S. carries out a wave of new strikes against Iran. Iranian leaders claim they're shutting down the Strait of Hormuz to all ships in response. And now the risk of returning to an all-out war, it's higher than it's been in weeks. The president says Iranian officials called him while he was in the Situation Room tonight and told him to stop the bombing. He also said to Fox News that if Iran doesn't agree to a deal, he will, quote, bomb the S out of them tomorrow night. Trump put it in slightly different terms earlier today while in the Oval Office. Either Iran can sign or the U.S. will keep striking.
We hit them hard yesterday, and we're going to hit them again hard today, in case you miss it, in case you don't turn on your television set. And we'll see what happens with the deal. All they have to do is they have to start signing a paper. It's fully negotiated.
Now, Trump has been floating a potential deal, over and over and over again, somewhere in the ballpark of 36 times. And today, there was a new reason to ask how critical that deal really is. Economic data showing the fastest price hikes since 2023. But the president did not flinch or show signs that it's weighing on him. Instead,
about the latest inflation number, which came out this morning, could that be a
No, I love it. The numbers were great. You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
Okay, now, look, I know Trump is no stranger to provocative answers, but loving the inflation? Well, that's an all-time head scratcher, isn't it? I can't think of anybody who loves inflation. It's like saying you love surge pricing because everyone wants to get into Madison Square Garden. Even the Biden White House admitted inflation was a problem coming out of COVID. It just waved it away as transitory. And you'd think that that's still fresh in people's minds, right? Because it is. I mean, a chart like this would give Trump some cause for concern. Annual inflation rising to a 3-year high. That's more than 4%. But Trump has been saying for weeks that sticker shock isn't going to change his approach to the war. And when it comes to Iran, your wallet ain't his concern.
How much longer will Americans continue to see these high gas prices?
Well, they're not very high.
To what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You want to see the world exploded? You want to see a problem? And this is peanuts. And I appreciate everybody putting up with it for a little while.
And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. And out front tonight, the breaking news: strikes are underway. As we speak right now, the U.S. is attacking Iran at this hour. Iranian state media says explosions were heard in 2 locations in the south of Iran near the Strait of Hormuz. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says, quote, key Iranian facilities will be bombed. And we've just got this just in. We'll show it to you. Iran's semi-official news agency is posting photos. We'll show them when we get them, of a drinking water reservoir that officials say was destroyed in a missile strike. And they're also showing munition fragments that experts are telling us appear to be from a U.S.-made bomb, one of the largest categories of precision-guided munitions. Now, we can't independently confirm those details. We'll show you the images when we have them, but that's what's coming out from Iranian state media, and it comes in the context of this: Trump levying threats against Iran earlier today.
We're going to be attacking them very hard. We hit them hard yesterday, and we're going to hit them again hard today.
Those strikes, Trump says, are in retaliation for an Iranian Shahed drone, which brought down a U.S. helicopter, a drone that cost a few $1,000s, bringing down a helicopter that could cost more than $40 million. Quite a feat, considering this claim Trump has been making for more than 2 months now. Listen to him.
We've wiped every single force in Iran out very completely.
Wiped out their military in every aspect. We've decimated them as a military. They have no military left. Iran's military is decimated. We have totally destroyed their military.
Well, the facts obviously show otherwise. And, well, it's not just the fact that the facts don't add up, and it's not people who are criticizing Trump who are calling out those inaccurate statements. It is now some of his biggest cheerleaders who are taking issue with that. Listen to Fox News host Laura Ingraham.
We keep hearing their military is destroyed, obviously, but if their military is destroyed, how are they continuing to hit us?
Okay, fair, accurate. And that coming just a day after Trump said a peace deal is imminent. And he claimed to be in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal, something that his cheerleaders are also taking issue with. Here's Fox News host Jesse Waters.
He keeps saying we're very close, we're days away, and I don't know what that means. We've heard that for a very long time.
Oh, he's right about that. No one knows what that means. In fact, Trump has actually made that claim at least 38 times since the war began. Well, today, Trump gave this explanation.
We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers.
And thanks in part to Trump's war with Iran, which is now in its 103rd day, annual inflation rose to a 3-year high of 4.2% in May, led by rising costs for energy. In fact, energy costs accounted for 60% of the increase. Energy costs that have surged because of the war in Iran. Trump, though, tonight said this about that.
I love it. The numbers were great. You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
It's such an odd thing to say, I love the inflation, but the comment is actually consistent for Trump. Remember this the other day?
To what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody.
And he actually went back and started the sentence with the predicate. You know, when you teach someone to, restate the question in the answer, he actually did it there. Kristen Holmes is out front at the White House. Kristen, Trump authorizing strikes on Iran for the second night in a row. We know this is happening as we speak. We talked about some of those images coming out of Iran now. What are you learning about where this is going, this escalation?
Well, that's certainly what we're trying to get to the bottom of, Aaron, because what we've seen from President Trump, we've seen this before. He's used this kind of rhetoric. He's even used strikes to essentially go all the way up to the line where he says he's going to obliterate a civilization, only to back down or extend a ceasefire in some cases. And we know that he has been trying to stay away from any kind of military action because he wants this war to be over. He wants to have some kind of diplomatic off-ramp. And that's likely why you're seeing the language you're seeing from CENTCOM, which is the U.S. Central Command, who put out this language about these strikes, saying that they were additional self-defense strikes, even though it is still a day later. And yesterday we had been told by U.S. officials that this was going to be limited in scope in response to the downing of that helicopter, and also saying that it was in response to Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. They're clearly trying to frame this in a way that this is still defensive strikes, not offensive strikes. So it gives you some idea of where this could be headed. But the other part of that doesn't really line up with what we saw today was the fact that President Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth were previewing this all day long, saying that they were going to strike again. So it is not as though they have been bombarded by Iran and now are defending themselves once again, but they are categorizing it as such. The other question about this is, what does this mean for those negotiations? We are clearly not in the same place we were 2 days ago when President Trump said a deal was coming in 2 to 3 days. You could hear his frustration today. This idea that Iran is tapping the United States along, something that, by the way, experts had told the United States and President Trump would happen in these negotiations because it's something that they have done before in the past. But at this point, you're seeing a level of frustration and a level of trying to figure out a way to bring the Iranians back to the table. The question is, do we go further? Does the United States go further than these strikes the second night in a row and enter back into a new phase where we are in a full-on military combat operation with Iran? Or are they going to actually just try to pull back and get Iran back to the table? We just don't know the answer.
Right. And of course, there's another player that can determine the answer to that, and that's Iran.
Right.
All right, Kristen, thank you very much. Kristen with the new reporting from the White House. And as I mentioned, Iran's semi-official news agency has posted photos of what they say is a drinking water reservoir that they say was destroyed in a missile strike. So we've got these images. Take a look at what you're looking at. They now also are showing images of munition fragments that experts tell CNN appear to be from a U.S. large precision bomb. Now, these are the images that we're showing you here. We can't independently confirm the details. Geolocation may add up, but obviously we don't know for sure when this was taken. I want to bring in Fred Pleiken because he is out front on the ground there in Tehran. And Fred, explosions heard tonight, multiple locations in Iran, much of it in the south along the strait with those new U.S. strikes. What more can you tell us about what's actually happening on the ground there?
Hi there, Aaron. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Iranians are saying that a lot of those explosions, or what people believe are explosions, are happening around that Strait of Hormuz area. One of the places that this seems to be focusing on is a little port town called Sirik, which seems to have some military elements there. Another place that we heard that there might be anti-aircraft fire is a place called Asaluye, which is actually one of the main energy hubs here in Iran. It's part of the Pars 2 gas field, which is very important for the Iranians. But again, not confirmed that there's any impacts there. There were some reports of some possible anti-aircraft activity, however, going on there. One of the things that we heard just a couple of minutes ago, and this comes from Iran Strait broadcaster, is that the Iranians are saying that the Strait of Hormuz, as far as they are concerned, is now completely closed down by the Iranian military, and that any ship trying to cross that strait will be targeted by the Iranians, whether it's an oil tanker or anything else. So that could be a significant development going on. I was able to speak to a senior commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps earlier today, and they vowed that there would be a harsh response if there were more strikes by the United States. So that's certainly something that we believe could happen in the not too distant future, the Iranians saying there would be immediate strikes. And one of the things that the Iranians, by the way, Aaron, have also been reacting to is what President Trump has been saying about them tapping along. The Iranians are saying, look, as far as the negotiating process is concerned, one of the things the U.S. needs to take into account is that because the U.S. and Israel targeted so much of Iran's leadership before, the security protocols that are in place right now just make it very difficult for the leadership to communicate here, and that just makes the process that much longer, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Fred Pleitgen, thank you very much, live in Tehran for us. Thank you. Out front now, Congressman Jim Himes. He's the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, and I appreciate your time tonight, Congressman. So what can you tell us about these new strikes as you understand what's happening?
Yeah. Well, it's part of a larger, a very dangerous game, right? So the Iranians are viewing this conflict as one big conflict. So when Israel, bombs in Lebanon, as they are, they regard that as a violation of the ceasefire. And I don't know all of the circumstances, but when a U.S. Apache helicopter goes down and we retaliate, you're into a world where they, of course, are also going to retaliate. And the reason that's a scary thing is because they have the ability. They have thousands of missiles, thousands of drones, and they don't necessarily have the ability to do a lot of damage to the United States military in the area, although we worry about that, but they have the ability to basically destroy the energy infrastructure in the UAE and in Qatar.
CNN is inside Iran as President Trump warns the U.S. will soon resume attacks on the country. He cited the slow progress on negotiations for a deal to end the war and Monday's downing of a U.S. Army helicopter by an Iranian drone. Meantime, a source telling CNN that a Qatari delegation is meeting Iranian negotiators in Tehran in an effort to bridge remaining gaps. We must also note CNN operates in Iran only with the permission of the government, but maintains full editorial control of its reporting. CNN's senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen is in Tehran.
It's not often that we're able to attend events put on by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the one that we're at today commemorates IRGC commanders who were killed when Israel attacked Iran in June of last year. Now, as you can imagine, senior IRGC brass is not necessarily very keen to speak to media from the United States, but we were able to speak to a senior IRGC commander as well as a cleric of Iran's armed forces, both of them telling me that they're not particularly impressed with President Trump's threats that Iran will pay a price for not making a deal with the U.S. so far. President Trump says that Iran will pay a heavy price for not making a deal with the United States yet. What's your response?
Trump is delusional. He must understand the power of this great nation, and he must recognize the strength of our armed forces. He should have become aware of the great movement of our armed forces in these recent operations and fully comprehend the readiness of our armed forces with the support of the Iranian people.
If until yesterday it was only the Islamic Republic that was sanctioned, today it is the U.S. that is sanctioned in the Strait of Hormuz. And that harm affects the whole world. The Islamic Republic has not been, is not, and will never be a war seeker.
Now, of course, all of this comes right on the heels of the United States and Iran trading blows, with the United States attacking sites in the Persian Gulf, including islands and also the port of Bandar Abbas, while the Iranians fired missiles at U.S. bases in Jordan, in Bahrain, and in Kuwait. Now, the Iranians have said that there will always be a tough response from their sides to any attacks from the United States. But of course, both sides are still working to try and put together a memorandum of understanding that would then pave the way for negotiations between the U.S. and Iran to reach a broader peace agreement. All of that, of course, right now in a very difficult state. A lot of people that we speak to here say they don't really have much faith that it could happen. At the same time, the Iranians are saying that they are ready for any new attacks and will strike back hard. From Flight Deck, CNN, Tehran.
Breaking news in our world lead, the U.S. military says it started conducting strikes against multiple targets in Iran for the second straight day. Let's go to CNN's Zach Cohen. Zach, what is the U.S. military saying about these strikes?
Yeah, Jake, as you mentioned, the second consecutive day that the U.S. military is conducting strikes against Iran, framing them once again as defensive in nature. And in response to Iran's, quote, unwarranted and continued aggression, U.S. Central Command releasing a statement on X just a few minutes ago saying, quote, U.S. Central Command forces began launching additional self-defense strikes today at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time against multiple targets in Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction. Again, this is something we've heard the president himself talking about earlier today, saying that U.S. Central Command would be conducting additional military strikes against Iran. We heard Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also saying earlier that U.S. Central Command would be, quote, very busy tonight. And it does seem like that activity has started. Last night, we did see that initial wave of attacks, which we've learned in the time since, really focused on military sites around the Strait of Hormuz. Now, these were things like air defense systems and radar. It remains to be seen what the targets specifically were this evening and whether they represent any sort of an escalation in this ongoing ceasefire of sorts. Have been waiting to see whether or not President Donald Trump would ultimately order some sort of an additional military action in an attempt to pressure the Iranians into agreeing to the terms that he has very clearly stated he thinks should be signed. But again, the Iranians have not indicated that they are willing to be pushed back to the negotiating table or pushed into agreeing to terms that they are not ready to agree to. So we'll bring you more reporting when we have it on the additional strikes this evening, but there is U.S. military activity again underway for the second straight day.
Zach Cohen, thanks so much. Let's turn to our politics.
And I guess at some level, any deal starts with opening the Strait of Hormuz, which was the status quo prior to the war itself. And to that effect, Trump is now saying that the U.S. military has been involved in what he calls a quote-unquote secret mission supporting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. He says that has resulted in more than 100 million barrels passing through. Obviously, if you look on, shipping and watching ships go, you don't see that. And then he also said this.
I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now.
I guess he's implying millions of their barrels that they are selling at obviously hugely inflated prices to finance the Iranian regime. What do you know about what he's saying there, about that Iran didn't until right now know we're taking millions of their barrels of oil and this 100 million barrels that Trump says he's actually helped get through the strait?
Yeah, well, look, a lot of that is just flat out untrue, right? And remember the record here, right? This war was going to be over in a couple of days. For the last 3 months, the Iranians have been 2 or 3 days or maybe a week or 2 weeks away from striking a deal. So let's just agree that the president has precisely zero credibility on anything that he says about the Iran war. But look, you don't need to be an intelligence expert to understand that in the Strait of Hormuz, you're not moving anything in secret.
President Trump says the U.S. will be launching more strikes inside of Iran today as Tehran is now condemning the latest attacks. In a new post on social media, Iran's president calls President Trump's threat to target power and water sites in the region, quote, not a display of strength, but rather a sign of helplessness. Notably, the president of Iran did not say anything about the peace deal that President Trump says has been fully negotiated. CNN's Kristen Holmes is live for us at the White House. Kristen, what's the latest there?
Perhaps the reason why he is saying this isn't coming from a place of strength is because we've heard these kind of threats before from President Trump, and that's really what's unclear at this moment. Is this just President Trump ramping up his rhetoric because he is angry that there is no deal, that he's frustrated, he's trying to get Iran to come to the negotiating table, or is he in fact considering ramping up military action in Iran, something that he has been not even just hesitant but unwilling to do for the past 2 months? And when he was sitting in the Oval Office today, he was asked a series of questions about Iran and indicated that it was time for a more aggressive stance. Take a listen to just part of what he said.
But we hit him hard yesterday, and we're going to hit him again hard today, in case you miss it, in case you don't turn on your television set. And we'll see what happens with the deal. We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers.
You can hear that he's frustrated there. I mean, just a reminder, it was 2 days ago that he said that a deal could be on the precipice within 2 or 3 days. It certainly sounds as though they are no longer on that square talking about being tapped along by Iran. And President Trump also said at one point that they were considering hitting civilian targets. Now, this isn't the first time that he has said this. As I noted before, in the last several months, he has gone all the way up to the line, but never crossed it. In fact, as you will remember, that April 7th, when he was talking about a whole civilization will die tonight, and then launched into the ceasefire. So right now, what is unclear, what we're watching closely for, is that President Trump has ramped up his rhetoric. He has said there are going to be more strikes, although we have not seen those since he has said that. The question is, does he just try, or is he just trying to get Iran back to the table by threatening them, or have we entered into yet again another phase of this war?
And as we come on the air tonight, the United States has unleashed a major attack that's lasting several hours on Iran. The Pentagon says American forces are striking multiple targets in response to, quote, Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. Iranian media has been reporting explosions at several locations along the Persian Gulf, while sharing images of what they say is a reservoir of drinking water that they argue was destroyed by a U.S. missile. When you look at this picture, experts tell CNN that the munitions fragments at that scene that you see here do appear to be from a U.S.-made bomb. Now, President Trump is arguing that this new round of strikes is in retaliation for Iran downing a U.S. helicopter that had 2 service members on board in recent days. Both of them were rescued, and initially the president told the Wall Street Journal that, quote, it wasn't a big deal. Now he's saying this.
We're going to be attacking them very hard.
You're resuming bombing?
Yeah, well, we are. Based on the helicopter, I guess we have the right to do that.
Central Command will be busy tonight, because President Trump said we will be hitting Iran hard, and we will be. Because Iran has a chance to make a good deal, a great deal, to codify what they said they've been willing to do, and they haven't been willing to do it.
Now, today the president also argued about Iran, quote, they've taken too long to negotiate a deal that would have been great for them. Now they will have to pay the price. It's a sentiment that he echoed tonight during a phone call with a Fox News reporter from the White House Situation Room. So the president is saying that's why the bombing is happening, and yet U.S. Central Command is describing tonight's attacks as self-defense strikes. If you listen to the defense secretary, though, the strikes sure sound like offensive strategy.
You can see when someone's trying to tap on a deal. Instead, they're going to have tap bombs dropping on key facilities in Iran from the United States of America. If we need to negotiate with bombs, we'll negotiate with bombs, and we're very good at it.
Now, as for what this means for the ceasefire that the administration has been arguing is still holding, despite the fire certainly not ceasing, the president said this tonight.
John, so Trump says he spoke directly to Iranian officials. What do you say to this report that you're hearing?
Well, the problem here is we've seen a pattern. The president will say whatever he wants to say to make it look like he's moving forward or that he's taking things seriously. I don't take the stuff that he says seriously anymore. I would like to. He's the president of the United States. But when you put someone like Bill Pulte in charge of the intelligence community, it shows that you're not working with your institutions. You're not going to the State Department, not going to experts, not going to the intelligence community. You're essentially are winging and talking to non-professionals. So he's talking to the Iranians. Who's helping him? Who's behind him? These are complicated and complex issues.
Good evening from the newsroom. We begin tonight with American airstrikes on Iran, which the president just moments ago told a Fox correspondent will stop shortly. He said again, according to Fox, that Iran asked him to stop bombing, but he reportedly added, we'll bomb the S out of them tomorrow night, unquote, if Tehran does not sign a U.S. peace proposal. Iranian state media, citing a senior official, denies that Tehran contacted the president. As for the strikes themselves, they came as no surprise. The president this morning said to expect them. And this afternoon at CENTCOM headquarters, Defense Secretary Hegseth was explicit.
CENTCOM, Central Command, will be busy tonight because President Trump said we will be hitting Iran hard, and we will be. Because Iran has a chance to make a good deal, a great deal, to codify what they said they've been willing to do, and they haven't been willing to do it. So As President Trump said, they've been tapping. You can see when someone's trying to tap on a deal. Instead, they're going to have tap bombs dropping on key facilities in Iran from the United States of America.
Just moments after he said that, the first reports started coming in from Iranian media of air defense activity in Tehran, explosions being heard elsewhere in the country. And about a half hour later, CENTCOM made the announcement online saying, quote, U.S. Central Command forces began launching additional self-defense strikes today at 5:15 p.m. ET against multiple targets in Iran at the commander-in-chief's direction. The strikes are in response to Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. We do not yet know what precisely is being hit, nor the size and scope of the operation, but Iranian media is reporting explosions in Qesem, Bandar Abbas, and several other locations along the Persian Gulf. Now, earlier today, the president said, quote, we hit them hard yesterday and we'll be hitting them hard again today. He also elaborated on his social media post this morning in which he said Iran would have to, quote, pay the price, end quote, for being slow to reach a peace deal. A deal he has been saying is close at hand for months now.
We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers.
Well, the president today also said this about what he suggested was a secret operation to spur oil through the Strait of Hormuz.
I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now.
The president said the operation has safely escorted 200 commercial vessels through the strait. Now, just for perspective, that's about a day and a half's worth of shipping traffic before the war. And shortly before airtime, Iran's military said the strait will be closed to all vessels effective immediately. Starting us off tonight, CNN Chief White House correspondent and anchor of The Source, Caitlin Collins. So what more do you know about the president's decision to order these strikes?
I mean, we're hearing two different things, Anderson, when it comes to why these strikes are being launched, which is today it was the president saying that Iranian leadership was taking too long to come to a deal. Yesterday, they said it was because the Iranians had downed that Army Apache helicopter. And so I think in terms of where they are ultimately trying to get here, we know what the president wants, which is an agreement and a deal to his terms that he has demanded of the Iranians. But so far, they have not been able to get there. And so yesterday, they were saying that the strikes were in self-defense. That is also what CENTCOM was saying tonight when they confirmed shortly after 5 p.m. Eastern that, yes, more strikes were happening. But as the president was saying to our friend Trey Yingst over at Fox, that this is in response to trying to get them to sign a deal and to come to an agreement with them, as he was also saying that the strikes will likely stop soon. And so it remains to be seen if what the president wants to do here, what he wants to have achieved here, is done as a result of these strikes. Because so far, Iran is saying that they will respond, that they'll retaliate. They're also saying the Strait of Hormuz is totally closed to any shipping vessels. That is something that CENTCOM is disputing tonight. And so it's still not clear exactly if this is going to end up in what the president is hoping with these strikes, which is getting Iran to sign a deal with him.
And is there any effort on the part of the White House to try to tamp down any retaliation from Iran after the attacks, any attempt to control escalation? Because both the president and Secretary Hegseth suggested there would not only be strikes tonight, but tomorrow if necessary.
Yeah, and there might be. I mean, if Iran responds within a proportional measure in the view of the White House, I mean, that remains to be seen. But also keep in mind, they've been arguing that they're totally decimated in their capabilities. Obviously, though, Iran is saying that they will respond here. And what stands out also, Anderson, is just how publicly the president is telegraphing this. I mean, he said earlier today that these strikes were going to be happening hours before they actually did and before they commenced around 5 o'clock today. Hegseth also said the same. So they're not really trying to catch the Iranians by surprise. They're publicly putting out there that these strikes are coming as they are trying to get them to a deal and to come to the table on that.
All right. Caitlin Collins, thanks very much. We'll see you at the top of the hour for The Source. Joining us now is former Assistant Deputy Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Dana Stroll. And here in the newsroom is former Army Captain and JAG Officer Margaret Donovan. Dana, both President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, they've explicitly said these strikes are intended to push Iran to agree to a peace deal that the president wants them to sign. Is this going to accomplish that?
Probably a couple hours of military strikes aren't going to fundamentally change this situation. Trump's team has staked out pretty maximalist positions in terms of what they want. The Iranians are doing the same thing. The two sides were far apart yesterday. A couple hours of strikes tonight is probably not going to change their calculus much unless Trump is prepared for a sustained military campaign, which it's quite clear he's not. I don't see the Iranians rushing to the table after tonight.
The War Powers Resolution says 60 days unless Congress declares war. The president has to take troops out. The Trump administration has claimed the 60-day window doesn't apply because this operation ended when the ceasefire began. Is that accurate?
That would not make any sense to me. I think that it's a legal fiction to say that the operation or that hostilities have ended because there was a ceasefire. First of all, there was a blockade throughout the entire ceasefire, and we have seen the United States use force against ships and third-party countries throughout that blockade. Second of all, as we've seen,
why would the existence of a blockade during a ceasefire mean that's not a ceasefire?
Because a blockade is an active war. It's only legal to employ one when you are actually at war, and it also authorizes the United States to use lethal force against both enemy ships and ships of third-party countries. So it's a very
hard yesterday, and we're going to hit them again hard today, in case you miss it, in case you don't turn on your television set. And we'll see what happens with the deal.
That from President Trump earlier today, just one day after saying a peace deal with Iran was imminent. This escalation, nearly 24 hours after the two sides began trading retaliatory strikes, the U.S. says its actions were in self-defense and in reaction to Iran downing a U.S. Apache helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz Monday night. Let's go straight to CNN political and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid. Barak, moments ago, Secretary Hegseth spoke about a secret mission to move oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Take a listen.
The idea of running ships through the Strait of Hormuz, it never stopped. It just went underground to the tune of over 100 million barrels that have moved through and more in the middle of the night, protected by the United States in a way that Iran can't stop.
President Donald Trump threatens new strikes on Iran. This is what we know, beginning with Trump's vow of more attacks on Iran today. Then the president claims an agreement to end the war is fully negotiated and all Tehran has to do is start signing a paper. He says the Iranians are dragging out negotiations as the United States plans a new round of strikes. Before that, another exchange of attacks happened between the US and Iran following the downing of an American Army helicopter. Tehran fired on US targets in Jordan and Kuwait, and video geolocated by CNN appears to show a flash of light near a US base in Bahrain. Kevin Lipdak is standing by for us. Kevin, where do we stand with this then?
Well, we're in this disorienting place where we're at neither a full ceasefire, as evidenced by what we saw over the last 24 hours, the U.S. and Iran exchanging fire. We're also not at a full-blown war. The president saying that we may be heading there, saying that the strikes could resume today, but not yet saying that he's ready to go back to full-bore conflict. And so it is sort of a liminal space where the president expressing dissatisfaction that the talks with Iran to try and reach this memorandum of understanding are operating too slowly, but still, I think, holding out hope that they will eventually yield a deal. Now, the remarks that we've heard from the president today really are a sharp reversal from the optimism that we've been hearing from him over the last several weeks at the status of these negotiations. You know, just less than 48 hours ago, very early Tuesday morning, the president was saying that he thought a deal could be struck with Iran in the next 2 or 3 days. He also sounded more reluctant than he'd ever been about going back to war, saying that it would kill a lot of people and it would cause the Strait of Hormuz to remain closed for some months. Today, he's sounding completely different, saying that he is willing to go back to conflict, declining to rule out hitting civilian infrastructure, including power plants and bridges, and saying that Iran, in his words, keep tapping him along when it comes to this deal. Now, the status of these negotiations still remains ongoing. You have a delegation from Qatar in Tehran today working to bridge some of the differences between the two sides when it comes to this framework deal. You know, they remain sort of in dispute on elements of Iran's nuclear program, about some of the financial relief that Iran could potentially receive as part of this deal. They don't seem as if they're completely at the end of the road yet on the negotiations, but President Trump suggesting that the deal that he has signed off on is one that Iran should agree to very, very quickly. He said it was a very good paper. And so I think we're in a place that is ultimately a very confusing one. Will we see these two sides go back to full-blown conflict? Will we see them arrive at a deal? We just don't know at this point, but the president seems to be injecting all of this with a degree of pressure as he tells Iran that the strikes will begin again sometime today.
And there was something potentially significant here in terms of escalation, wasn't there, Kevin? He didn't rule out the possibility of strikes targeting civilian infrastructure in Iran. And that was after Iran said that water reservoirs had been struck already.
Exactly. And remember, the president, before this ceasefire went into effect in April, had been threatening some of those sites. It was, I think, alarming to a lot of people because it could amount to a war crime if the U.S. intentionally targets facilities that are not military in nature. And so the president reviving some of those threats. Now, what's unclear is whether he's using these threats as a pressure tactic to try and get Iran to finally sign off on this plan that he has been trying to negotiate, or whether he is, in fact, newly willing to resume the war. We just don't know at this point. And of course, he's someone who has used bluster in the past to try and get adversaries to come over to his side. And so what exactly is happening right now, I don't think we really know. What is clear is that the president's frustrated that this is taking so long, and we have heard that from him in the past, that it takes so long to get some of these drafts to the Iranian supreme leader, so long for him in turn to get his positions back to the United States. That's clearly weighing on the president, who is under pressure to get this war over and to get the Strait of Hormuz reopened. And so clearly, I think now we're in a waiting game to see if these strikes do in fact resume, if the president does in fact target some of those civilian infrastructure facilities, or whether Iran comes back and says that they can agree to a deal. The president clearly, I think, tapping his foot, very eager to get this over the finish line.
Kevin, thank you so much. Let's go to Fred Pleitgen now. He is in Tehran. We have to note that CNN operates in Iran only with the permission of the government, but maintains full editorial control of its reporting.
It's not often that we're able to attend events put on by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the one that we're at today commemorates IRGC commanders who were killed when Israel attacked Iran in June of last year. Now, as you can imagine, senior IRGC brass is not necessarily very keen to speak to media from the United States, but we were able to speak to a senior IRGC commander as well as a cleric of Iran's armed forces, both of them telling me that they're not particularly impressed with President Trump's threats that Iran will pay a price for not making a deal with the U.S. so far. President Trump says that Iran will pay a heavy price for not making a deal with the United States yet. What's your response?
Trump is delusional. He must understand the power of this great nation, and he must recognize the strength of our armed forces. He should have become aware of the great movement of our armed forces in these recent operations and fully comprehend the readiness of our armed forces with the support of the Iranian people.
If until yesterday it was only the Islamic Republic that was sanctioned, today it is the U.S. that is sanctioned in the Strait of Hormuz. And that harm affects the whole world. The Islamic Republic has not been, is not, and will never be a war seeker.
Now, of course, all of this comes right on the heels of the United States and Iran trading blows, with the United States attacking sites in the Persian Gulf, including islands and also the port of Bandar Abbas, while the Iranians fired missiles at U.S. bases in Jordan, in Bahrain, and in Kuwait. Now, the Iranians have said that there will always be a tough response from their sides to any attacks from the United States. But of course, both sides are still working to try and put together a memorandum of understanding that would then pave the way for negotiations between the U.S. and Iran to reach a broader peace agreement. All of that, of course, right now in a very difficult state. A lot of people that we speak to here say they don't really have much faith that it could happen. At the same time, the Iranians are saying that they are ready for any new attacks and will strike back hard. From Pleitgen, CNN, Tehran.
Back to our top story, the threat of new U.S. strikes on Iran from President Trump. President promising the U.S. will hit Iran again hard today. That's after the two countries traded blows following the downing of an American attack helicopter. The US president has warned that the US could once again hit critical infrastructures in Iran, such as power plants and bridges. The Iranian president called that warning a sign of helplessness. So what we want to know is, can a diplomatic path really be found between the US and Iran? Joining me now is Bilal Saab, Senior Managing Director at Trends US and a former Pentagon official in the first Trump administration. Bilal, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, how are you reading what the president is saying, this contradiction that talks are happening, they're going well, but that attacks are going to restart?
No, I don't see a contradiction, Max. As a matter of fact, we're not in a really unique terrain here. We've seen this before, where things are happening simultaneously. You get a few shots fired here and there, exchange of fire between the two sides, and yet they are still negotiating. My understanding, I hope I'm not wrong on this, is that they've really made a good bit of progress with the help of the Qataris and the Pakistanis over the past few days. So prior to this military incident at sea, they have gotten pretty close to the number of issues over which they've been negotiating, including the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear stuff, and the frozen assets. Now, just like anything else in high-stakes negotiations, it's always the details that matter, which I've been doing my best to, pay attention to. And then, of course, the sequencing, right? You do this, I do this, and then we move forward. So, no, I think this is just a bump in the road, to be honest. I hope I'm not naively optimistic about it.
It's not bilateral, though, is it? We've seen this week, haven't we, that Iran is bringing, not just the Strait of Hormuz into the equation here and the nuclear issue, which applies to them, but also what's happening in Lebanon and the Israeli internal pressure to push hard against Hezbollah. All of these are different moving parts, and they're historically complex, and some people would say unsolvable anyway. So how's the president managing to balance all of that? Because I know there's a lot of frustration, obviously, in the Netanyahu camp about how he's, some would say appeasing Iran on some issues.
And probably some of the complexity of this whole thing is that there are just too many cooks in the kitchen, which means that anyone could have an opportunity, let's call it, to spoil things, right, to play the role of spoiler. But the core negotiation remains. And if there is a breakthrough on the US-Iran negotiations, it should have positive effects on everything else. And I do agree with one of the officials who was interviewed lately, if I'm not mistaken, by Axios, saying that the longer this thing drags on, then the more opportunities for these spoilers to play a role and essentially, make this a little bit more difficult. But I am of the opinion still that I don't think any of these players outside of Iran and the United States could torpedo the whole thing. I think President Trump and the Iranian leadership, whoever it may be that they're negotiating with, because really don't know right now who they're negotiating with, are the central players in this matrix.
What do you make of these potential attacks on more critical infrastructure, power plants, bridges, civilian structure? Some people would argue that's a war crime. Should he not be focusing on military targets?
Yeah, I don't want to, sound flippant about it, but it really doesn't cause such a major change in the process of negotiations. I don't think it's a make or break. I don't think it really has the potential to really collapse the whole thing. Obviously, President Trump is frustrated that we're not at a stage where we can actually sign a deal with the Iranians. He seems like, he's frustrated by the pace of the Iranian decision-making system. But on the other hand, this is typical, the U.S. approach over the past few weeks and months, where there's some contradictory messages and some confusion, where he said, sitting with the embassy reporter, if you recall, Max, saying that, well, look, we were in crises with Vietnam and Korea, in Afghanistan and Iraq for years and years and years. So I can wait this as long as I want. But on the other hand, he seems quite frustrated that, the Iranians are taking their sweet time and they're not making a decision. So I don't know where he is mentally, psychologically on this, but I will revert back to facts. Let's just stick to facts. There has been a good bit of progress on the core issues that separate the two sides over the past few days with the help of the Qatari and Pakistani mediators. Now it's just a matter of time. I don't think they want to go back to war. Neither side wants to go back to war. Neither side wants to go back to military action. It's just that there's certain things that there's no way the administration will not respond to, including, of course, this military incident that happens in the waters of the Persian Gulf over the Strait of Hormuz.
President Trump says the U.S. is going to resume attacking Iran, quote, very hard. Trump has suggested that Iran's downing of a U.S. Apache helicopter is pretext for the renewed strikes. The president is also, though, bemoaning the slow progress of talks with Tehran, which he does say are still ongoing. Trump is not now ruling out attacks on Iran's civilian infrastructure, raising quite hard legal questions. Oil prices are higher. Brent crude is trading around $94 a barrel, West Texas Intermediate, just a couple of dollars less. President Trump says that oil prices would be much higher if it wasn't for the U.S. military. In a post on Truth Social, Trump revealed something. He said that last month, I directed our great U.S. military to execute a secret mission to support oil tankers and other commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says that as a result of that, more than 100 million barrels of oil have made it out onto the open market. He declared that the U.S. controls the Strait of Hormuz, not Iran. Kristen Holmes is at the White House. And Kristen, listen, the president revealing that operation seemed perhaps a message to the oil markets. Not the first time he's revealed information that he hopes might move the markets. But first, I wonder, how big of an escalation is the president threatening now, and might this mean the end of the ceasefire?
The key word there is threatening. It's not necessarily what he's planning on actually doing, and we've seen this before. We've seen him use rhetoric where he talks about bombing civilian infrastructure, where he pushes. At one point he was saying he was going to make an entire civilization extinct. He's never actually crossed that line since he started with these threats. It's usually the rhetoric that he uses, the bluster he uses to try and bring Iran to the table, to try and strong-arm them into some kind of a deal. And one thing was very clear today when we heard him in the Oval Office. He is very frustrated. I mean, it was just 2 days ago that he was saying that a deal was imminent, that it would be reached in 2 to 3 days. It obviously doesn't seem as though that is the square we are on now. Of course, we saw those strikes yesterday. What we had originally been told by U.S. officials was this idea that these were just retaliatory, that they were expressly meant to respond to the downing of that Apache, that they were limited in scope, they were military targets along the Strait of Hormuz, and that this wouldn't affect negotiations. Now, of course, you have President Trump saying that they're going to continue striking them throughout today as well. So the question is there going to actually be another military operation, or is this once again President Trump just trying to push or needle Iran into making a decision or into signing this document that he says is sitting in front of them? He continued to say it was already negotiated, all they have to do is sign it. Just to be clear, though, this rhetoric hasn't worked before. I mean, we're still in the exact same place that we've been, even when President Trump threatens these, enormous military operations or wiping out a civilization. In fact, the day that he was threatening to wipe out a civilization ended in a ceasefire. So, and that was 2 months ago, and yet we still don't have any kind of a peace deal. So it's really unclear right now, Jim, what he's willing to do and what is just him frustrated trying to bring Iran back to the table.
Right now, we are following the latest round of escalation between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. Central Command saying they are now finished hitting targets in Iran in response to an Army helicopter getting shot down over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran state media, however, released new video overnight saying they retaliated to the U.S. by launching missiles against targets in Bahrain and Kuwait and an airbase in Jordan. Joining me now with the latest, CNN international correspondent Paula Hancock's in Abu Dhabi. Paula, can you talk about this? We know Iran, throughout the last couple of weeks, they've tried to spread the war throughout the region. What have you heard from officials in Kuwait or Bahrain about confirmed damage?
The next few hours are going to be crucial as to whether or not this is an isolated escalation between the US and Iran, or whether it is a step on the escalatory ladder. Now, at this point, we have not heard any damage assessment or casualty figures from those countries which were targeted by Iran, that is Jordan, Kuwait and Bahrain. Iran said that it had targeted the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. They also say that they targeted a military base in Jordan, Kuwait as well, saying that it was intercepting incoming aerial missiles and drones. So what we've heard from Iran's side is that they have said that no attack will go unanswered from the United States. What we had seen from US Central Command is they said they had carried out what they called a, quote, proportional response to the shooting down of that Apache helicopter, saying that there were 3 locations along the Strait of Hormuz that were targeted. They say that they hit air defense, ground control stations, radar sites as well. Now, one US official telling CNN that this was really intended to be a warning to Iran, and they do hope that they will still be able to keep the talks on track, that it won't hinder those talks, although we've heard from Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson that Iran is reviewing negotiations at this point, accusing the US of negotiating in bad faith.
All right, the breaking news this morning, Iran says it launched strikes on U.S. assets in the Middle East, including an American base in Jordan. This follows U.S. retaliation for the downing of an Apache helicopter. Iran also targeting the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Video geolocated by CNN does appear to show a flash coming from the area of a U.S. naval facility there. Both Bahrain and Kuwait say they intercepted a number of Iranian strikes. The U.S. military now says that it has completed its own strikes against Iran in response to the downed Apache helicopter. Iran state media says U.S. strikes hit 2 reservoirs, cutting off drinking water access to 20,000 people. There's been a really great deal